And welcome everyone as you enter into our Zoom room here and our Zoom webinar. You are joining us tonight for the Historical Society of Santa Rosa's presentation with our special guest speaker tonight talking about the Sonoma County Archives, a treasure trove of history. And I'm going to give everybody a moment to enter in. Thank you all for registering and thank you for participating. We also are being streamed simultaneously live on Facebook. So as I allow a few more people in, it is just now 6 o'clock. So we're going to give them a good solid minute to join us. And then we will start with our presentation. Thank you again for joining us. As I was saying earlier, welcome to everybody. I see about 30 participants. I know we had about 58 registered. 6 o'clock on a rainy night. I'm assuming that folks are going to be coming in as the presentation continues. So welcome everybody. Good evening. Thank you for joining us here on our Zoom webinar, also broadcasted live simultaneously on Facebook. This evening's presentation is brought to you by the Historical Society of Santa Rosa. And this evening's presentation is the Sonoma County Archives, a treasure trove of history. I want to remind our attendees that we will be doing a Q&A session after the presentation. So please hold your questions to place into our chat room after the presentation this evening. And I'd like to introduce you to our special guest, Katherine J Rinehart. Katherine is a consulting historian who holds an MA in history from Sonoma State University. She is the former manager of the Sonoma County History and Genealogy Library, the Sonoma County Archives, and the current chair of the Sonoma County Heritage Network. She is the author of Petaluma, A History in Architecture, and is a regular contributor to the Sonoma-Marin Farm News, a Sonoma County Farm Bureau publication. And on behalf of the Historical Society of Santa Rosa, it is our pleasure to host Katherine this evening and learn more about the Sonoma County Archives. A quick reminder for those of you that are just joining us that I am Leslie Graves and I will be facilitating questions from the chat bar after the presentation. Welcome, Katherine. It's great to have you here. I believe the last time I saw you in person maybe was at an event, a historical event in Sonoma County. It's
for the sesquicentennial.
Yeah, great. So Katherine will be taking over our presentation at this point. Thank you again for holding your questions until the end of the presentation. Katherine has about an hour, solid hour of presentation to go. Thank you, Katherine.
All right, Leslie, see if I can get these slides to advance. Come on. Okay, great. Thank you to whoever. The internet. So good evening, and thank you, Leslie, and thank you to the Historical Society of Santa Rosa for inviting me to speak this evening to share information about a topic that is near and dear to my heart, the Sonoma County Archives. Sonoma County Archives is one of 4 Sonoma County Library special collections that anyone interested in history, whether they be scholars, journalists, property owners, attorneys, authors, genealogists, architects, cultural resource managers, and or countless others. These are folks that depend on finding answers to questions that can be found, answers to questions that can be found in the archives. The other three special collections of the Sonoma County Library are the Petaluma History Room, which is at the Petaluma Library, the Sonoma County Wine Library at the Healdsburg branch, and the History and Genealogy Library, which is in a separate building located adjacent to the Central Santa Rosa branch, which I suspect many of the 39 participants, who I can't see, have visited over the years. The staff at the Sonoma County History and Genealogy Library and the head cataloger are those who are working for through the library who are most knowledgeable about the archives, what it contains, and the materials that are used. Okay. So I have, like Leslie mentioned, I have 59 slides, went a little crazy, but those of you who've heard me speak before, this is not uncommon. So here's how it's going to go. First, we're going to have an overview of how the archives came to be, a bit of recent history that describes steps taken by the library that document their understanding of the inappropriateness of the facility in which the archives are housed, a warehouse at Los Quilicos campus, and the current state of affairs. So with that, we'll launch right in here. So some of you may be aware that the Sonoma County Board of Supervisors and the City of Santa Rosa adopted a joint resolution officially designating the Sonoma County Library as the official archives for the county and the city in September of 1965. At the time, the county was getting ready to demolish their beautiful 1908 courthouse. And this reminder, many of the historic images that you're going to see tonight are from the Sonoma County Library's wonderful collection. They have probably close to 50,000 images now that have been digitized and are easily obtained through their website. Okay, so they're getting 1908 courthouse, getting ready to demolish it. Again, this is 65. And then, sorry, why are we not advancing here? Okay. They had already started construction of their new administration building here, we can see. And then to what it is today. Located on Mendocino Avenue. Meanwhile, the there we go. The 1904 Carnegie Library, located at the corner of 4th and E Street, had been demolished 3 months earlier in March of 1965, and plans for building a new library at the corner of 3rd and E were well underway, and it was expected that that building would be completed in 1967. Then we have the City of Santa Rosa, and they too are ready to tear down their city hall located here on Hinton across the street from the county courthouse. And this was demolished in September of 1969 and replaced with the current Santa Rosa Civic Center. And here we are on opening day of the Santa Rosa Civic Center that's on Santa Rosa Avenue. So it seemed like with all these buildings going away and a new library being constructed, there we go, it seemed logical to think that this new library would have plenty of room to house an archive. And in fact, they did. For several years, the county and the city archive was located in the basement of the downtown branch. But then by 1978, I have to think that issues of access and room were starting to be a problem, because we see the Sonoma County Records Inventory Project established. And this was a project that was sponsored by Sonoma State University. And the idea here was that it was grant funded through a grant from SETA, S-E-T-A, and staff and volunteers would take an item by item inventory of documents housed in various county departments, beginning with the holdings of the Office of the Recorder. And at the time, the recorder and the clerk's office were two separate entities, which now they're combined. So that happened, and then in '79, they completed that first inventory of the recorder's records, and they published a book, which actually is available through the Internet Archive if you'd like to see all of what they discovered. Also in '79, we see the establishment of the Sonoma County Historical Records Commission by the Board of Supervisors. And I believe there may be some members of the current Historical Records Commission here today. So if you are, thank you for being here and thank you for all you do. The first Historical Records Commission report was presented to the Board of Supervisors in June of 1981. And this is just, I don't know if you can see this, this is just the cover letter that went with a quite sizable report. At the time, the commissioners were Bernice Peterson, who served as the chair, and she was the county recorder, Bob Curtis, who was a land surveyor, living and working in the Healdsburg area, Timothy Houston, who was a Sonoma State librarian and also the co-coordinator of the Sonoma County Inventory Project, Dennis Harris, Sonoma State history professor, and librarian Audrey Herman, who served as the Sonoma County Library's designee. And for many of you, you may know of Audrey for her many years managing the history and genealogy collection. 3 points made in this cover letter that I want to point out is that they reported on the need for an archives and records management policy. Apparently in 1981 there was none. The need for a county archivist and the need for a county archive and records center. So that was 1981. In 1984, the county does establish a county records management position, which isn't quite the same as a county archivist, but we're making progress here. 85, the inventory of the Office of the Clerk is published. And then we have this 10-year period in which the topic of where to house the archives is discussed at several Sonoma County Library commissions and historical records commissions. Now on November 6th, 1985, a joint meeting was held between the Library Commission and the Historical Records Commission that was attended by county staff, specifically General Services staff. And I hope that this is something that can happen again. At this meeting, basically all these stakeholders came together to talk about trying to find a solution to finding a suitable location for the archives. And initially, their idea was to renovate Primera Hall, which is what it was called at the time, out at Los Guilicos. This is a 1927 brick building that originally served as a men's dormitory for the Knights of Pythias, who owned the property we know today as Los Guilicos. But that option was deemed too costly, so they scrapped that idea. But then, so that is in, 1985. A few more years go by. 1991, a grand jury made inquiries into the status of the storage and preservation of county archives. Obviously, this is not the 1991 grand jury, but I wanted something as a placeholder here. And this is actually the first grand jury to meet in the new 1908 Sonoma County Courthouse. It's also a reminder to me to let you know that in the archives are grand jury reports that go back to at least the 1890s. So we could find that 1991 grand jury report that looked into this issue. Finally, 1995, the Board of Supervisors authorized moving all archival materials housed in the basement of the Santa Rosa Central Library and from the County Record Center and from various county departmental offices. The library was paid $61,000 plus or minus to move and catalog the collection that ended up at this warehouse, which was constructed in the 1950s at Los Guillicos. The library entered into a 3-year lease with the county, paying $1 a year, and that lease was renewed repeatedly. And I'm told the current lease is expected to expire in August of 2021. So we've talked about the move, what these items that were moved to the archives. Now let's talk about what those items were. So I mentioned the grand jury records, but also court records, naturalization, tax records, architectural drawings, road petitions, you name it, it's there. And every format you can imagine, from, and here's just from the big heavy tomes, these volumes, to newspapers, some of which are bound, some of which are not, maps, petitions, etc. Now, since I'm speaking to the Historical Society of Santa Rosa, I wanted to share some specific historic materials that relate to the city of Santa Rosa. Go on. There we go. All right. So here we have on one shelf, to your left there, or my left, is Santa Rosa City Court records that date from 1937 to 1953. And this collection contains dockets of misdemeanor charges brought before the Santa Rosa City Court. There are 33 copies of these books. What exactly they have to tell you, I'm not sure, but wouldn't you like to know? Then on the right, we have so some of the materials have been rehoused. This is an example of one where we have information relating to appropriations that the Sonoma County Board of Supervisors made for district fairs that were held in Santa Rosa beginning in 1891 up through 1916. I love this picture, but and it's great because for Santa Rosa, this is a very telling. Everything on this shelf is from the city of Santa Rosa, as we can see there on the spine. We have books of arrest. My favorite there is miscellaneous and liquor licenses. We have some with no spine at all, so that, begs inquiry. And we've got tax collectors, all sorts of interesting things there. Here we've got, I get ahead of myself. I look at these fun pictures and I get lost. Here we have something called criminal docket books. These were from city of Santa Rosa. There are a total of 51 volumes that date from 1906 to 1955. Probably can't see this document on the left, so I'll tell you what it is. This is a photograph of a page from Board of Supervisor minutes that Jeremy Nichols shared with me. And what it's telling us is this is a resolution declaring the intention of the Board of Supervisors of the County of Sonoma to abandon the county farm. And this is dated September 14th, 1937. So this would be the county farm that was over off of Shenate in the general vicinity. the Bird Rescue Center. And so it's on the, I guess for me, it would be the south side of Shenate. To the right is a record uploaded by the Sonoma County Library cataloging staff to the Online Archive of California. And if you leave this presentation knowing nothing else, I want you to know about the Online Archive of California, where you can find collection guides for libraries and archives across the state, including those for Sonoma County Library. So here we see an entry for Sonoma County Hospital records, 1900 to 1980. Apparently there's 2 boxes, gives a little bit of a description. Well, one of the things that would be in that box would be a telegram from the secretary to Congressman Lee, who is writing to the Walter Nagel, who was county clerk at the time. This telegram is dated September 27th, 1935. And basically what it is doing is letting the county of Sonoma know that the president, in this case it would be President Franklin Roosevelt, had approved a grant, which was a Public Works Administration grant, for $110,250 for the construction of the Sonoma County Hospital, which would be this building, which of course has been in the news a lot the last few years. All right. Next. Okay, so after last month's excellent presentation hosted by the Historical Society of Santa Rosa about the history of Santa Rosa Creek, I was reminded about the records for the Santa Rosa Waterworks that exist out in the archives. And so this picture was taken for me by a member of the History and Genealogy Library staff who was out there last week. And so this is just a sneak peek. This is from 1878, and shows stock certificates for the Santa Rosa Waterworks. And on the left is a document dated January 13, 1913, and it relates to a stockholders annual meeting for the Santa Rosa Waterworks. I found it interesting. I don't know a lot about the waterworks. I knew about the Mark McDonald connection, but I found it interesting that all of his children, including 3 of his daughters, I think it's 3, yeah, Mabel, Florence, and Edith, were all stockholders in the waterworks, as were his son and son-in-law. And then again, over on the right, we see the Online Archive of California that tells you what all exists related to this business. Okay, so one of the, well, I find everything out there really important, but road petitions are one of the collections out at the archives that are one of a kind and really important to land surveyors and others. And what we're looking at here is a map that was in a road petition packet. And when you think road petition, it is what it sounds like. You had to petition to have a road created, and you had to go before the Board of Supervisors. You had to get petitions signed by people who were going to be impacted by the road. And there were several different things that had to occur, including mapping the road. And if you could see this map, you would see not only the road, but you see a lot of the landmarks and, you know, Joe Smith's cottage or such and such lodge, or, you know, things that are really would give you a sense of what was happening in the area, in this case in 1889, between, this is Rincon Valley Road to Marquess Springs to Santa Rosa Road. Okay, now I'm going to get into sort of a sub-collection of the archives, which is called the Wallace Collection. What we're looking at here is a 1946 blueprint for the Janssen Motor Company. And not only do the blueprints exist, but so do the specifications. That's what's laying over there on the left. I was really excited for so many times we find cool things about buildings only to learn that they've been demolished. Not the case with the Janssen Motor Company. That building is still standing. One of my most favorite buildings in Santa Rosa is the Crest building on 4th Street. So I was tickled when I found a whole set of blueprints for that building in the archives when I was working for the library. And so I took a few photos. Here's just one piece of a plan. And then, of course, a historic image of the Crest building there. It's interesting. There are not that many historic images of the building straight on. This is, so the library scanned those blueprints, and this is a really great example of why scanning isn't always what you'd hoped it would be. This tells me that really when it comes to blueprints and large format items, you're better off doing high resolution digital photo capture. Okay, so I wish you could see, how many times can we say that tonight? On the left, those are specifications for a cafe and a residence for Mr. and Mrs. Rico Venturi. And from what I could tell, that restaurant or that cafe was, I'm going to mispronounce this, Marico's, that, as it turns out, would later become the Cricklewood restaurant in Larkfield, which burned during the Nuns Fire. Whoops, go back. I had to throw in that picture in the bottom because I discovered that Mary Venturi was, before she was married, was Mary Bettini. And so I had a picture of her. That's her, the middle on the top row. And that picture, if I'm not mistaken, was hanging or is hanging in the Hotel La Rose, because at one time her family as well as the Venturis managed the Hotel La Rose. But you all can probably tell me more about that. Okay, so what is the Wallace Collection that these great things are part of? Well, the Wallace Collection is associated with Marshall Wallace there on the right, and his nephew, Henry Wallace. Marshall Wallace was a former county road commissioner, a sanitary engineer, and surveyor, and his nephew, Henry, established a civil engineering firm in Santa Rosa in 1952. And so the Wallace Collection is all of their records. And it's such an important collection that the Historical Records Commission, with funding from the Landmarks Commission and the Sonoma County Historical Society, was able to hire consulting archivist Lynn Downey, there on the right, to process or begin an inventory of what all the Wallace Collection consists of. Oh, there we go. And this is just a very small fraction of the Wallace Collection. But she got about 3/4 of the way through. And that inventory is now with the library. Okay, so we've talked about what's in the building. Let's talk about the building itself. In March of 2017, the Sonoma County Library published the facilities master plan. And on page 9, shown here to the right, they basically went through all the facilities that they manage and determined condition. And maybe you can see there that the second item after the annex is the archives. And this building got 6 red dots indicating bad condition and 3 gray dots indicating non-applicable or not addressed. On this page, they talked about priorities, which facilities they were going to tackle first or last. And again, here we see the Northwest is number 1, and that would be the Coddingtown branch, the Petaluma Library, and then the archives listed as a high priority, and you can see why. There it is to the right. Now, the Northwest Library since 2017 has received a refresh, and the Petaluma Library is about to undergo a renovation. So why would this be a high priority? Well, besides the outside, here's the inside. The photo on the bottom left was one I took following the Nuns Fire, and the debris that you're seeing on the top of those boxes is from, you can't really make it out, but the photo on the top are these vents that exist in the roof, and debris came through those vents onto the boxes in the archives. The archives also has a leak, which isn't the end of the world in that everybody knows there's a leak, and so all materials have been moved away from it. But fixing it hasn't occurred because this is a building the county has long desired to demolish, so they're not going to invest in it. So it leaks, water sits there, creates a moist environment, not ideal. Okay, I mentioned the Nuns Fire, October 2017. So the warehouse that houses the archives is located at the base of Hood Mountain. And so this is basically looking out the front door to Hood Mountain following the fire, and you can see how close it came to the building. I think it was like 450 yards. It survived that, but now it's sitting in the middle of a flash flood and mudslide zone. Okay, well, dodge that bullet. The press didn't miss reporting on that issue, so we got some nice coverage there. Ironically, prior to October 2017, the library had been working with the California Preservation Program to coordinate a disaster training workshop. And this workshop was designed specifically for libraries, museums, historical societies, anybody that was charged with caring for historical materials. It was a great workshop. There were over 30 participants from all over the Bay Area and as far away as Butte County and Sacramento. What they're doing here is learning how to salvage wet material. So that's good. Recognize that the building is not what it should be, that the library is not prepared for disaster. They're taking these steps. So the next thing to happen is in the summer of 2018, I have to stop saying we, because I'm not there anymore. The library works with Barclay Ogden from the California Preservation Program again, and he is a retired director of library preservation at UC Berkeley and a co-coordinator of the California Preservation Program, which until I think 2 years ago was funded by the California State Library. He visited the archives and he prepared an assessment that confirmed what many of us already knew. He made a recommendation to move the most important and most vulnerable materials back to the central library or annex. And this would allow for temperature-controlled environment, better security, and much better accessibility for staff and the public. And so that happened in the summer. Then in the fall, the Library Commission staff presents that report to the Commission, and at the same time, they want to share conversations that they've been having with the Historical Records Commission, who has developed a strategic plan that one of their major goals is to deal with the archives, find a permanent facility, and also to clarify who's on first. The library has custody of the records. They've been managing them for decades, but clearly the county itself has a role in all of this. And maybe if there's anyone watching, I want to make sure you understand that the county library and the county are two separate entities. The library is not a department of the county. They don't fall under the general fund. So there's this sort of interesting relationship. Part of that was that the the Historical Records Commission was asking the Library Commission, if they would help them reach out to the Board of Supervisors and get the conversation moving with what to do with the archives. So that was in November 2018. I lost my slide. Now we're into March, and thank you. Okay, so November 2018. Then by March of 2019, the Library Commission, they're taking this seriously. They've authorized funding for a space plan, and that was conducted by a consultant that look at what Barclay Ogden had said. And so they come to the commission in March of 2019 with their recommendations. And here are those recommendations. And they're looking at moving everything back to, it's sort of ironic that you would move everything back to the central library basement, which is where it was to begin with, but something's happened. Everything that was in the basement, all the administrative functions and cataloging and different processing, all of those people and everything that goes with them had all moved to Rohnert Park, because after the passage of Measure Y, the library was able to rent a facility in Rohnert Park that they call the Sonoma County Library headquarters. So that's where all the IT operations, graphics, the library director, cataloging, all sort of the behind the scenes stuff that goes on with running a library. So a lot of that had been in the basement. That was all gone. Now there's all this real estate, so to speak. So that was an option. And so this space plan provided a cost estimate that included an inventory, reboxing, moving, purchasing compact shelving, which was going to be needed for the basement and possibly the history and genealogy library as well. Library Commission didn't take action on that right away. But what they did do is they, in response to the Historical Records Commission wanting to reach out, have their assistance in reaching out to the Board of Supervisors, library staff and the Historical Records Commission worked on this rack card. And it's just for an educational purpose, very simply. On the one side, here's what the archives are. On this back side, here's the problem, and here's what needs to be done. Because it was realized that prior to 2017, the Board of Supervisors and probably the majority of Sonoma County didn't even know an archives existed. So the idea was that library commissioners would take this rack card and they would go speak to the Board of Supervisors, individually, and they'd have this information to share and could also share it with others. By December, things keep moving forward. The library realizes they have a surplus, and so they approve $137,000 to pay a consultant to do an inventory and rehousing. So this was a piece of that original space plan document. And by February, they get one proposal, and happens to be from the same company that did the space plan, but all looks good. The idea is that at the April commission meeting, staff will present the proposal, and ideally the commission would approve it, and we'd they'd go off and running and do the inventory and rehousing project. Of course, we know that in March of 2020, COVID hit and put the inventory and a whole lot of other things on hold. Funds for the inventory were diverted elsewhere. Several open staff positions, including history and genealogy manager, were frozen. And then we have another fire. And what we see in this picture here, one, Kevin Fixler's article, that of the glass fire, Los Guilicos received the bulk of the damage from that fire. And this building that we're looking at is just a stone's throw from the archives. So scary on several fronts. Just to get oriented. So we've got the archives there circled with the black. across the street from Oakmont on Pythian Road at the base of Hood Mountain. And so you can see how the Nuns Fire and the Glass Fire were right on top of it. So the fire occurs, then some other things happen. So November 2020, now by now the library is back, they're open, they're not open to the public, but they're operating. Director Hammond shares with the Historical Records Commission that there are no plans to fill the History and Genealogy Library Manager position at this time, and that she will not be appointing anyone to represent her at the on the Historic Records Commission. These are two big things. All of a sudden, the archives no longer has an advocate within the staff, because the manager of the History and Genealogy Library had always served in that position. And the not appointing someone to represent her on the Historical Records Commission, that was the first time that has happened since the commission was created in 1979. So that's sending a message. So in December of 2020, the Advocates for the Sonoma County Archives Committee organizes with the mission of, come on, there we go. Basically, they're all about relocating, improving the management, and providing access to the archives. And I am the co-chair. Lynn Downey is the other co-chair, and then our other members are listed here. So this is a committee. We're not a nonprofit. It's a committee that's operating under the Sonoma County Historical, so many things, Sonoma County Heritage Network, which is a organization that's been around since the 1980s. It was started by the Sonoma County Historical Society. And basically this is a group of individuals. We have a little over 100 members who represent historical societies, genealogical societies, museums, libraries, public, private, and academic archives across the county, and a few in Marin and a few in Napa. And we get together and talk about ways in which we can promote and preserve history in this region in a variety of ways. So we're a committee of that. So one of the first public things we do is provide comments at the January 4th Sonoma County Library Commission. We are joined by 12 others who also submit written comments that are read aloud at that meeting. And what do we say? We talk about the archives being a unique resource, that this is a collection, a unique collection that is an asset to the library. We talk about we ask that this one-of-a-kind collection be prioritized in the 2021-2022 budget and accompanying strategic plan. We point out what we believe the commission already knows, but we want to get it on the public record. The warehouse, the Los Gilicos lacks environmental controls, has twice been threatened by destruction of fire, is located far from those who manage it. The general theme from us and the others presenting or speaking: fund the inventory, move the collection. Gay LeBaron writes an article following that a couple weeks that gets a lot of attention. A lot of folks write letters to the editor. They write to the library commission, boards of supervisors. So this is all bringing the subject before the public. Good news. So bringing it up to date. So where do we stand? Well, good news is the Library Commission has heard the public. They are now have the archives update as a regular agenda item. The library director has authorized an inventory using existing library staff who are most knowledgeable about the collection. The commission seems to be supporting a larger consultant-led inventory. Not so great. No one possessing archival management background has been assigned to take a lead on the project. The library director is focused on determining ownership issues, and we do know that something will happen by September 1st, but it's not, we'll need to, maybe in April, we'll get a better sense of what that is. In the meantime, there is an existing archives task force that Library Commissioner Karen Snyder is the liaison, but as far as I know, that task force has only met once, and that was in December. And it did not include members of the public or of the Historical Records Commission. We do have the short-term solution, and short-term could be 5 years, that the space plan recommends. Better yet would be a permanent facility. There is funding. Measure Y, remember that measure that you all voted to support that brought an 1/8 of a cent sales tax goes directly to the library? Well, based on the most recent Measure Y Oversight Committee report, there is $11 million that's sitting in reserve for capital projects. And no one's been able to figure out what exactly those are. $11 million wouldn't be needed to take care of this problem, but some, maybe $2 million, could resolve this. Meanwhile, I just want to talk about the fact that it's important that the library continue to build upon and fund existing cataloging and digitization efforts. So even though there's no comprehensive inventory, there is a lot you can find using the library's catalog. And here's how you get there. And then, of course, I mentioned the Online Archive of California, which is here. So I encourage you to check that out. Where to find information. If you want information on how to navigate those various points of entry into the archives, I recommend contacting the staff at the History and Genealogy Library. Now, although they can't retrieve items and bring them back for you to look at, they have been very generous in photographing materials and doing the best they can during the shelter-in-place orders. And then, of course, the library is not going to be closed forever. I recommend reviewing video recordings of past Library Commission meetings to get a sense of how those 11 commissioners and the director are talking about this issue. The next meeting is April 5th. The agenda and the packet comes out the Friday before and is on the library's website. And then you can follow the advocates for the Sonoma County Archives on Facebook and Instagram. And also on our website, which on our website, we have a petition that you can sign. We have all the different newspaper articles and letters to the editor that have been written and other information and a way in which you can contact us. And you can contact the library director and commission. They are in the driver's seats. You know, there is the sense that this is shared responsibility between the library and the county. That is true. But again, they have custody of the records. They have, they've been managing the records and providing access to the records for decades. They need to take the lead. And so here's the email for the director and the commission. Also recommend letters to the editor and board of supervisors. So I think that's all I have to say for now. Oh, and I'm supposed to.
And thank you, Katherine.
Thank you.
I think we will allow you to grab a little bit of water there. That was a marathon. I feel like we were all just given a semester's worth of information, many, many years of your hard work and experience in order to bring us all of that information tonight. So thank you so much. are a number of questions already, and I want to leave this screen up there just in case people are writing down this information. And remember that you can go to the Advocates for Sonoma County Archives website, which is socoarchives.org, which is on this page right here. So I'm going to be looking in our Zoom chat room for some of these questions. And we did have a number of participants as well joining us live on Facebook. And so one of our first questions is, what is the best email address to send ideas of where the archives might be rehomed? So I know that you gave out quite a bit of information, who to contact and to kind of push along. But what if somebody just has an idea that they really want to share? Who should they contact?
I would share that with the director of the library and the commission.
Great.
And if you want to CC the advocates, we'd appreciate it.
And they can always go to your website, which is the www.socoarchives.org, and email you and maybe get that information so that they're not dependent on trying to write that down here.
Yes.
Great. Perfect. Thank you for all the compliments in chat. I did see a number of folks too start to raise their hands, and we did design this as a webinar, so it's much more like all of our attendees are sitting in an auditorium, and Katherine's up on stage giving her presentation. So that's why we waited until the end of the presentation for questions and answers. Larry, thank you so much. You did ask last month about how to give a gift membership to people from the Historical Society of Santa Rosa. And Larry, thank you so much for leaving your information right there. I will have your information. I will make sure that our contacts and leaders, board members from the Historical Society of Santa Rosa will get your contact information and make that gift possible. So thank you so much. That's a great gift to give folks in Santa Rosa, in Sonoma County, is a membership to the Historical Society of Santa Rosa. I'm sure that giving a few dollars to the socoarchives.org is a pretty good idea too, right, Katherine?
Yeah, so that I'm glad you brought that up. Since we are not a nonprofit, we've partnered with the Sonoma County Historical Society, who's our fiscal agent. So they are accepting checks on our behalf, and there'll be information on our website shortly about how to do that.
Great, great. So that's a perfect way to do it so that you can continue your good work and have a parent organization like the Sonoma County Historical Society taking care of those finances for you.
It is great.
So Larry, I love your style. He asks, why all the big bureaucratic deal? Why do we need to talk about this? Why do we need to go through proper channels? Why not just target someone with a extra cash, maybe like those, the Trion family, who may be happy to provide a temporary resting place for all this stuff. We know those big idea and big donors out there in Sonoma County. So why can't we just, kind of bypass the bureaucratic aspect of it and go right to one donor? Is there
I totally agree with you, Larry. And it needs to be the library doing the asking. And they do have a fantastic fund development director that would love to hear from you. And yeah, that's the thing. They need to let the public know what they're going to do. If Measure Y isn't an option, then okay, what's Plan B? And I do think that there are options out there. There are people that would help out if they knew who to talk to.
So just following up on Larry's question, so to be clear on this, the advocates for the Sonoma County Archives, it can't be the driver. You're being the cheerleader. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Our job is to shine the light on the situation, provide education, because it is acknowledged. I mean, here I feel like I'm speaking to the choir, but there's a lot of people that don't know what the archives is, and even if they do, they don't quite understand why we would want to protect them. So we feel that we're providing that role to the community.
And a great point about that, by providing that role and doing a webinar like tonight, this is being recorded, and this will be uploaded onto the Historical Society of Santa Rosa's YouTube page, and then it can be shared widely. So it's a great way to archive this in order for it to have more exposure and to shine that light. So thank you for doing this. From Karen, I have a question here about the PG&E funds. Has anyone approached the city of Santa Rosa or the county for any portion of those PG&E funds related to the fires?
That has been brought up several times, and I know that, for instance, that came up for the Historical Records Commission, and I think Steve Lovejoy might be in the audience, who's the chair of the commission. I believe the secretary of the Historical Records Commission, Amanda King, who happens to be the deputy clerk recorder, I think she talked to the county about that, and I just don't know that it went anywhere. I had thought, and others, that this is a preventative thing, so there would be a nexus there, but I just don't know where it's at.
Great. Well, Larry continues to make the case of getting.
Who is Larry?
I think Larry would love to be on your board or be one of your advocates. So he looks like he's ready for the job. Larry, thank you so much. Your energy is amazing. I love it. Debbie asks, could the archives be housed at the Sonoma Developmental Center or Development Center? Is that an option?
Well, that's been brought up a lot, and I'm kind of changing my thinking on this. Initially, I didn't think this would be a great option because it's so far away from those who manage it, and those being the staff of History and Genealogy Library. But then I realized, well, that situation could be remedied. Way back when, pre-Measure Y, the History and Genealogy Library was only open Wednesday through Saturday. And so there was Tuesdays were Archives Day for the manager at the time. That wasn't me. So, the History and Genealogy doesn't need to be open to the public Monday through Saturday. They could be open like Wednesday through Saturday, and then they could be out at the archives, wherever the archives may be, 2 days a week. Now, again, if the library continues to manage them, there are some issues related to sort of infrastructure, but I think it's an idea worth pursuing. And I'm just going to say that.
Well, that brings us to our next couple questions here, talking about you have the wealth of knowledge and the expertise to maybe develop a list of potential sites. If the Sonoma Development Center is potentially on your list of the top 3 or 5 sites, do you have a list? Is that something you can share with us? Is that something that you like to promote?
It's been really tricky because I feel like these are ideas that should be coming from the director. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I have some ideas more about what the ideal facility would be. 5,000 square feet, light industrial, with space for staff, volunteers, and researchers to to work. Because one of the things about the Los Gallicos facility, not only is it far away, it's completely inhospitable from a work environment. It should be one story. It should have a loading dock or a roll-up door, and close to those who are going to care for it. So I have to think that that wish list is out there with so many, I'm sad to say, businesses vacating, business park type buildings as part of the COVID issue.
Yeah. So it doesn't sound like the current downtown Sonoma County Library in Santa Rosa would be an option, that the basement area, someone from Facebook, Elaine from Facebook, was asking that question.
I think it's an option if, as a temporary measure, until you can find that perfect situation. There's been a couple letters to the editor about the talk about a new county city center and moving into the downtown. And so, one thought I've had is, okay, well, why don't you, wouldn't it be great if whatever happens that they factored in a new archive as part of that planning process? Well, we know that idea is going to be, it's a ways off from becoming a reality, whatever that reality looks like. So that might be an option. Now, the other thing is, if you do move everything downtown, I've been trying to get my arms around the idea that there's this assumption that the library, which the city of Santa Rosa owns, will have to go away. And it's like, isn't a library usually a key component of a county, city, civic center? So there's a lot of questions there. But yeah, I think the current site it's doable, but it's a temporary situation.
So speaking of another possible space that is on the works right now, because we've got some money that is being set aside for the building in Roseland.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So is that something that maybe it's a multi-story building? There's a question about that. That's something that sounds like you would support it as long as it can be safe.
Yeah. And I just see in the the chat, I'm getting tired. The West America building in downtown Santa Rosa. There's also the, correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't the wine museum going to move into the AT&T building that Hugh Futrell owns?
That's a whole other webinar.
Yeah. So
for those that are listening in, that was.
I live in Petaluma, by the way, so I'm not up to speed on all this.
So yes, Nancy also brings up that the obvious point that we shouldn't be building this maybe in a site in the path of fire. So we're probably not going to head for Fountain Grove, I would imagine.
No, and I saw, and that was another thing that's been brought up about the Sonoma Developmental Center. But there are measures you can take you can't never build anywhere near a hillside, but yeah, Fountain Grove. And then I love I would love to see something happen with the county hospital site, to see those buildings, maybe what used to be the tuberculosis sanitarium could be the new archives. But again, that's right in the path of fires and apparently earthquake.
And that's, so you're talking about the Shenate site.
The Shenate site, yeah. Yes.
Okay. And Brett also asked to remind us who again has the authority to give the go-ahead to spend the Measure Y money on the archives. You had mentioned Measure Y. Yeah,
so like many measures that are passed by the voters, there's an oversight committee, so they kind of keep an eye on that. But it's the commission that is deciding how to spend that money. And then if there's any irregularities, the oversight committee will come up and say, hey, that's not appropriate. And you can find, if you go to the library's website and you just search, not the catalog, but the website and type Measure Y, you can get information on who's on that oversight committee. It's quite a large group of individuals.
Great. And Teresa does mention the urgency of this and the likelihood or the unfortunate likelihood that we may have summer fires, and the potential for it to be burned. Thank you, Teresa. You're talking about writing to the county board and the Press Democrat to voice your feelings. I have been seeing some letters to the editor in the Press Democrat. So I think there was one today, or was it yesterday?
Yesterday, the chair of the Sonoma State History Department wrote an excellent letter.
Yeah, so those are great also to share on your social media sites. If our listeners and participants have social media sites and they can share that, get more people involved. This recording will also be on the Historical Society of Santa Rosa's Facebook page, again on the YouTube site as well, so you can share it from there and get more people involved. Share the Sonoma County Archives, the advocates for the Sonoma County Archives website address, which you see on screen right now, socoarchives.org. And also want to ask with that around the potential of a fire. Is there a plan for removal of the archives if a fire was coming down that path? Is there any emergency plan to grab the archives and take them someplace else? I remember the Museum of Sonoma County, had thought about, okay, what do we do if the fire comes all the way to downtown Santa Rosa?
Yeah, so even though there was that disaster planning workshop in 2017, there is no plan. And then to complicate matters, I mean, when I was working for the library during 2017 and the fire broke out, we didn't have a plan, but even if we did, the area was evacuated so fast, nobody could have gotten in there to retrieve anything. So that's another thing about the distance. And you mentioned the Sonoma County Museum. Interesting enough, they have a storage area right next to the archives out at Los Guilicos as well, where they're storing some artifacts. So it's another thought is, what I know they're exploring options for what to do because they want to get out of there as well. And one thing I want to share with folks, it has been a little challenging just the way things are set up with the commission. Just like a city council meeting or a board of supervisors, you have an opportunity to present public comment, but it's this sort of one way, it's not a conversation. Mm-hmm. You provide your comments, and because of the Brown Act and other things, the commission, the council, the supervisors don't have to respond. They can maybe acknowledge what you've said, and then future actions will indicate that they heard what you said. But what would be really helpful is a lot of people have great ideas, and there's people like has been mentioned that have money and may want to help. But there's the conversation, it's not set up for a conversation. So maybe in those comments that you make to the commissioners, hey, can we have a workshop? Or, let's be part of the solution instead of, it feels some, sort of adversarial, and it's not a good place to be.
So just the system in and of itself is set up in such a way that creates that. So a workshop or a town hall, something to where there's a little bit more of a give and take, or like you said, a conversation. So has a conversation happened with Sonoma State University or Santa Rosa Junior College?
Well, the Karen Schneider, one of the library commissioners, is the dean of the Sonoma State Library.
Mm.
So she's also the one that's on this task force. As far as the junior college, I don't believe there's been any outreach. Right now, I think it's just been the commission kind of and the director sort of trying to figure this out on their own. And I think it's time for a larger group.
So another question from Debbie, how about someone like Mike McGuire, who I hear is just, maybe a couple weeks away from having a little one of his own. So maybe, but I'm sure his staff are still going to be doing a lot of work, maybe he'll take a couple days to have a baby, right? But maybe someone like our state senator, Mike McGuire, could convene a town hall on this issue, over Zoom. Is that something that could be possible? Would you be open to that?
Yeah, but again, I need to make sure that the library is a part of that.
Yeah. Right. It all comes back to the library, the commissioners, those in decision making. So we've got a little bit more, got a retired corporate librarian just learning about these issues here. Another Katherine, by the way. Yeah. I wonder if there's any data that has been collected over a period of years recording the number of archive uses. So, how many people are coming in and out, the purpose that they're coming in and out. Gay librarians rat card quote is a good one, but it is really a known what the value there has been in access to so much old material.
So a lot of it's anecdotal. The record keeping has not been great. Over the last couple of years, it's interesting, the library seemed, a lot of their stats, just from a public library, is like how many books have been circulated and, things like that. But they haven't been tracking like reference questions and use of reference materials because it's a little more complicated. But that has been taking place over the last 2 years. So there's some information there. One of the biggest users of the archives has been the county departments themselves. And this is where the rub really is the county they'll put stuff there, actually deed it to the library, although there seems to be some disagreement on that as to the library actually then owning those materials. But anyway, their records go out at Los Galicos, and then they find they need them for a lawsuit or a public information request. And so they call the library, and the library's got to go out there, get the materials, bring it back. And so there's a lot of this going back and forth. And that's really not how an archive is supposed to work. It's not a lending library. Mm-hmm. So there are some stats on that because those deliveries have taken place because of drivers for the library. So that was not a very clear answer, but...
I think that by sharing that information, that makes an argument for this potential of a downtown city, county, and the state building is right there as well on D Street, right? Mm-hmm. And I've heard at city council meetings the past Santa Rosa City School Board member has mentioned, well, why don't we get the school board and school offices there, right? So making this really big, very efficient downtown center. So the archives, if the county is using the archives, if county departments are using the archives on that level, it'd be great for them to be right there.
Exactly.
Right. And I know that some conversations have been happening already about that. So between the county and the city and even, the state representative. So we just got to get you a seat at the table, or someone a seat at the table. Right. And here's a question from a Facebook participant. Again, thanks everybody for being here. Our time right now is about 7:15. We had scheduled this to go till 7:30, so we will continue to take questions. Appreciate everybody being here on the Zoom webinar and also on Facebook Live simultaneously. This question comes from Facebook, and more of a comment, just seeming like Sonoma State would have the land available not only for a new building for the archives, but also for the Museum of Sonoma County materials as well that you just mentioned. These, whether it be Sonoma State or it be the JC, that maybe these are players to be in this conversation as well. And when we're talking about this, I wanted to ask, is there any, kind of a blueprint of other archives in the state of California, in other states, in the other counties that have gone through something like this? What did they do? What was the best practices? How did it work? How did it not work? Do you know any of that information?
Yeah, no, I'm really glad that you asked that question. There are some examples that we could look at. Yolo County, now that's a situation where the library is part of the county, and so their public library also serves as the archive, but it's all integrated, and that seems to work really well. And then they have a nonprofit friends group that provides financial support, volunteers to help with digitization and all of that. So there's an example there. Marin County is a little different, but so at the Marin Civic Center, there's the Antique Kent California room. Really great collection. And then someone came to the library with a collection, a private individual who was a surveyor for many, many years and had this enormous collection, just kind of like the Wallace Collection, but even bigger. And he wanted it to be made accessible to the public. So if anybody's interested, information on that, they can contact me through our website. The county got together, various departments donated money to buy the collection, and then they now have an archive at, I think it's called Marin Commons, which is kind of there in that Terra Linda area. Ironically, it's in the same complex where Marin County's emergency services headquarters are. But so it's a county-owned building that they were able to take over and do tenant improvements, I guess you would call it. And it's a beautiful facility. And they got support from the community, the Board of Supervisors, and a group of land surveyors. And that's it's kind of the same thing. So the staff from the Antique Kent California History Room are over there once or twice a week or by appointment. Another example, a little different, is I think it's called the Sacramento History Center, where they're a nonprofit, but the city of Sacramento and the county of Sacramento pay that nonprofit to manage their archives and I think provide a facility. So in this case, the library is a nonprofit. So, that could be something that could be arranged. And I think that's something that Director Hammond is, what she's after is she wants some, and rightly so, some financial compensation from the county if we're going to continue managing records that they're still using. So yeah, It is unique. It's unique. The Sonoma County Library system is unique in itself, and it's this joint powers situation. Most libraries are either part of the county or city in which they operate, or they're private. Like Marin, I think like Mill Valley is one small example of that.
So, and that leads to some challenging issues around, I think you mentioned earlier in your presentation, who's on first? So who's in control? Who is actually the decision maker? And right now, maybe there's a situation where one entity can say, well, really it's their decision. And the other entity can say, really it's their decision to make. Yeah. So, equity. I wanted to ask about equity a little bit because we haven't had any questions about that. And accessibility to the archives, we've talked about that a little bit. I noticed in Gayla Barron's article, there was a mention of records that are in Spanish. The number of records from the 1890s or something, I believe.
1840s.
1840s. Okay. Yeah. So, I would imagine that there is probably more coming into archives digitally now of diverse population of Sonoma County, more diverse population. So how is that equity? How can we serve equity better? And more people know about the archives and whatnot. Goes back to that usage question. Is it just promotion? Is it just getting the information out there?
It is. And one of the things that Barclay Ogden pointed out that it hadn't really clicked with me is by moving the archives closer to those who manage them and making them accessible, because people don't know what they're missing, so to speak, if they don't know it exists. And so with the staff in there looking at what these records are and getting a better sense of the questions that they can answer, they can then share that with the, and it kind of builds. The more you know that's there, the more you continue to look. I don't know if this is really what you meant in terms of equity, but one of the things that I'm struck by with some of the records that are out there, these primary documents tell the stories of people that are not going to be written about in your standard county histories. I mean, there's the indigent rolls, that show during the Depression and earlier, people that have signed up for public assistance. And I mean, you really they have a name, they have a story, and it's part of our history, but they're invisible otherwise. And so you need these primary documents to really dig in and see the full story. One of the things we found, speaking of the full story, is there's documents about the creation of Petaluma's African-American church that existed here in town in Petaluma, beginning in the 1860s. Has the names of the trustees and all sorts of information. Well, there's a lot of people that didn't even know that Petaluma had an African-American church. So there's so much to be discovered, but right now there's a bit of a mystery.
Right. We can't lose that history, because then those stories would be lost as well. Mm-hmm. And that heritage of Sonoma County, which, with many of the things that are happening in our county right now, it's about that visibility and those stories being told and being known, and so that people have a sense of belonging. I see here that there is one more question. We'll wrap it up with this. It's a repeat question from Facebook. How much would it cost approximately to get the archives to the safety of, let's say, the basement at the central branch of the library, or to, in that temporary fix?
The temporary fix is going to be about, and this is scary because I'm live, but knowing what the cost estimate was back in 2019, $2 million, and a big part of that is the shelving and getting the shelving into the basement is not going to be easy, and the shelving itself is very expensive. But it's interesting. It's not going to get any cheaper. And oftentimes, it's like, oh, it's too expensive. Well, how are you defining what expensive is? You don't have a place to start. So
maybe we'll bump that up for you, 2 to 3 million.
Yeah.
Why don't we just be safe?
Okay.
Well, we're going to wrap it up with our questions and answers at this point. Thank you so much to everyone for joining in, for such thoughtful questions, for those that want to jump on board and be a part of the solution by making your voices heard to entities that Katherine shared with us, like the commission and our local editor of the newspaper, our Sonoma County Board of Supervisors, and there was one more, Katherine, that you wanted to share, have them send
contact
to.
The director, the commission, the Board of Supervisors, letters to the editor.
Great. And really want to thank Katherine for all of your hard work. I don't want to say that you're an unsung hero, because we're gonna sing your praises here, and we're gonna keep singing them. But and all the rest of the board members that are on your advocates for the Sonoma County Archives, thank them for all of their hard work. Your co-chair for helping to, like you said, shine a light on this issue. We need these stories and we need records of these so that we don't just know about them, but we want more people to know about them. We want them to be around for the future. Again, this presentation tonight and our webinar series of events is put on by the Historical Society of Santa Rosa. And next month on April 15th at 6 p.m., that we are going to be bringing to you lost stories of a highway and a neighborhood. And that will go into the information about the Highway 101 archives and them shedding new light on Santa Rosa's landscape. And that'll be presented by Margie Purser and Lynn Prime, both from Sonoma State University. I think Margie is now retired, but I'm going to keep saying that she's from Sonoma State University. And thank both of them for joining us next month on Thursday, April 15th at 6 p.m. Be sure to look for that information to come out on the Historical Society of Santa Rosa's website. And again, that website information is right there, historicalsocietysantarosa.org. So Katherine, thank you once again for being here this evening and for answering all of our questions. We are now going to be somewhat of ambassadors for you and getting that information out there to Sonoma County. Again, thank you to all of the participants on Facebook Live and here on our Zoom webinar. That's going to wrap it up for tonight, folks. Be sure to check out those websites, socoarchives.org, for more information, for emails to get to Katherine and ask more questions. And to the Historical Society of Santa Rosa, Larry, we're going to hook you up. We're going to get you to be able to get that gift of membership to the Historical Society. Thanks so much, everybody. We'll see you next month. Good night.
Good night.